My name is Ellen. I'm 52 years old. I'm a librarian in Savannah, Georgia, which means I have spent most of my adult life in rooms full of other people's words. I thought I knew what words were for. I thought they were for communication, for reaching across the space between one person and another. My husband Thomas died 11 months ago, a heart attack, sudden on a Tuesday morning. He was 54, he was making coffee. He had just said something to me about whether we needed more milk, and then he was gone. I found the box 3 months after he died, when I finally had the strength to go through his study. It was a plain shoebox under the bottom shelf of the bookcase, pushed to the very back. I almost didn't see it. I almost put it aside without looking. But there was something, some quality of weight when I lifted it, that made me sit down on the floor right there. Inside were 23 letters. None of them had ever been sent. None of them had envelopes. They were just letters, written in his handwriting, and kept. Thomas was a civil engineer. He designed bridges, which, looking back now, seems like it should have told me something. He was a man who understood structure, who knew how to span distances in theory. In person, he was quiet, not cold, never cold. He was warm in the way of a room that holds heat well. You felt it, you just couldn't always point to where it was coming from. He wasn't a man who said much about what he felt. When I would ask, "What are you thinking?" he would say, "Nothing, really." I believed him for 27 years. The letters told me he had been lying. I don't want to suggest the marriage was hollow. It wasn't. There were 27 years of Tuesday evenings and Sunday mornings, of driving through rainstorms and sharing the same opinion about a film, of knowing without asking what the other person needed in a particular moment. He showed up, consistently, reliably, in all the physical ways that love requires showing up. He just didn't narrate it. He didn't explain it. He didn't reach across the space between us with words. I used to think that was simply who he was. The box changed that understanding. I sat on the floor of his study, and I read them in the order they were dated. The first was from 1998, 2 years before we met. The last was from 6 weeks before he died. 23 letters. 26 years of writing to people he couldn't reach, or couldn't say, or couldn't bring himself to actually send it to. I read them slowly, the way you read something, when you understand that the act of reading is not reversible. Once you know, and the person I thought I knew was both exactly who I thought he was and someone I had never met. The first letters were to a woman named Margaret, someone he had loved before me. He had never talked about her much. I had assumed that meant she didn't matter much. The letters told a different story. He wrote, "I keep meaning to stop thinking about the way you laughed. I keep meaning to, and then I hear something funny and I think of telling you. It has been 4 years. I don't know what that means about me." He never sent it. Reading it, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not jealousy, tenderness, because that is exactly how Thomas moved through things, quietly and all the way. 6 of the letters were to his father. Their relationship had been complicated. His father was a man who did not use the word love. Thomas had told me this matter-of-factly, as a piece of data rather than a wound. The letters showed me the wound. He wrote, "I keep rehearsing things I want to say to you. In my head, they sound fine. When I'm actually in front of you, I can't find them. I don't know if this is something you taught me or something I arrived at on my own. He never sent it. Reading it, I understood something about Thomas I had been circling for 27 years without landing on it. One of the letters was addressed to himself, to Thomas, age 42, from Thomas, age 52. He wrote, "I keep waiting for it to get easier to say things out loud. The hard things, the things I mean most. It doesn't get easier. I think Ellen knows I love her. I think she can feel it. I'm less sure she knows how I see her, the specific way, that she hums very quietly without knowing she's doing it. I should tell her these things." He never finished the letter. I didn't know I hummed without knowing it. Now I notice every time. By the time I reached the last letter, the afternoon light had turned. I had been on that floor for almost 4 hours. My legs had gone numb. My tea was cold. The last letter was the newest, dated 6 weeks before his death. My name was on the outside of the fold, just Ellen, in his handwriting. I held it for a long time before I opened it, because once you open it, there is no letter left, and I wasn't ready to be out of letters from him. He started it the way he started everything, without preamble. "Ellen, I've been meaning to write this for years. I've started it probably 15 times in my head. This is the first time I've let myself actually write it down. I don't know why now. I think it's because I turned around in the kitchen this morning and saw you reading, and you didn't know I was looking, and I thought she has no idea what I see when I look at her. And that's my fault. It has always been my fault. I have loved you in ways I never learned to say out loud." That's a sentence I keep not finishing. That's the sentence this is. I had to put the letter down. He wrote, "The things I see when I look at you are not the things I've ever managed to tell you. I see the way you become more alive in libraries than anywhere else. I see that you make a specific sound, almost not a sound, when you're reading something that matters to you. I have listened to that almost sound for 27 years, and I've never told you that it is one of the best sounds in my life. I'm sorry I was a door that didn't open more often. I should have opened more." I read that paragraph 3 times, and I thought, you were not a door that didn't open. You were a door I had learned to knock on softly, and I didn't knock enough either. The letter ended simply. I don't know why I'm writing this instead of saying it. I know why. Because when I write it, I know the words don't fail me. When I speak them, they get lost between here and the air. Forgive me for all the times the words got lost. I love you very specifically. That's the thing I most want you to know. Not generally. Specifically, the you that hums without knowing it. Thomas. He died before dinner that evening. He never tried. He never got to tomorrow. I didn't cry, not right then. I sat there until the room went dark, until I could hear the neighborhood outside. Someone's dog, a car, a distant television, the ordinary sounds of the world continuing. I kept thinking, 6 weeks? He wrote this 6 weeks before. He was going to try that evening. He wrote it down so the words wouldn't get lost between here and the air. And then he didn't get a chance, not because he was afraid, because the morning ended and he was gone before he could try. That is a specific cruelty of timing, not malice, just Tuesday. I've asked myself, in the 11 months since, whether I feel betrayed. Here is what I've found. The word betrayal doesn't quite fit, but the word loss does. A kind of loss I didn't know I was carrying. Because for 27 years, I had believed the version of Thomas that he presented, the quiet one, the contained one. I had loved that Thomas fully. But there was another Thomas who was only ever on paper, and I loved him too when I read him, and now I have to grieve them both. The one I knew, and the one I never got to meet. Thomas was not unfaithful. He was not dishonest about facts. What he had was a rich interior life that he did not know how to share, and a pattern of expressing himself fully and freely, only in words he never intended to send. The letters weren't a betrayal. They were the truest version of him I ever encountered, and that is its own kind of grief, because I'm sitting here with 23 letters from a man I loved for 27 years, and in some of these letters, I find him more completely than I did across the kitchen table on any ordinary night. That should not be possible, but it is. I've read his letter to me perhaps 30 times now, each time I find something I missed before. He said, "Oh, I love you very specifically." Not generally, specifically, the you that hums without knowing it. I keep coming back to that word, specifically, because that is what we most want from the people we love, not to be loved as a category, a wife, a partner, a person, but to be seen as the particular, irreducible self we actually are. He saw it. He just couldn't say it across the air between us. He said it to a piece of paper instead, and somehow that piece of paper found me. About a month after I found the box, I started writing back. Letters to Thomas that I will never send, that have nowhere to go. I found myself understanding for the first time why he did it. There is something in the act of writing to someone, the real, complete act of it, that allows the truest things to come. The screen between you and the recipient disappears. You stop editing for their reaction. You say what you actually mean. My first letter to him was 12 pages long. I told him about the hum that I had no idea. I told him I forgive him for the door. I told him I wish he had knocked more. Guy, I want to say something to anyone who loves someone quiet, someone who shows up but doesn't narrate it, who cares but doesn't announce it, who when you ask what they're thinking, says nothing really. I want to say they may not be empty. They may be full in a way they don't yet have the language for, or the courage for, or the habit for, because no one modeled it for them. The quiet ones are not always withholding. Sometimes they are simply waiting for the moment they can finally say it. And sometimes that moment doesn't come, not because they didn't want it to, just because Tuesdays end. And I want to say something to anyone who is a Thomas, anyone who has the words, who finds them easily on paper in their head in the 3 a.m. darks, but loses them in the space between thought and speech. Say them, not perfectly, not in the right order, not when you've rehearsed them enough that they sound right. Say them badly, say them approximately, say them in pieces. They need to know they are seen. They need to know specifically. Don't leave it in a shoebox. Don't let it be a letter they find after you're gone. There is a word in psychology, Alexithymia. It describes a difficulty in identifying and describing one's own emotional states. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the absence of language for feeling. Thomas, I think now, had some version of this. He felt deeply. I knew this in the way you know things, about someone you have lived alongside for 27 years. He just didn't have the architecture to speak it in real time. Paper gave him architecture. The shoebox was his architecture. And when he died, it became mine. A friend asked me once, if you could go back knowing what you know now, would you rather have found the letters or not? My honest answer is I don't know. Not finding them would have left me with Thomas as I understood him, and the love was real. The marriage was real. Finding them gave me something else, a fuller picture, a grief that is larger and more specific. But also this, I know now that he saw me, the specific me, the humming one. So I'm glad I found them. I'm devastated I found them. Both true. The shoebox is on the shelf in my study now. Not hidden, not displayed, just there. Inside are his 23 letters and my letters to him, which are growing. I write to him sometimes when I have something to say that I can't say to anyone who is actually here. I understand now why he kept writing. There's something in a letter you never send, a permission it gives you. The sentence doesn't have to land anywhere. It just has to be true. I've started to wonder how many people have a shoebox somewhere full of the things they meant to say. I've changed something since finding the box. I tell people more now, not dramatically, but I've started saying the specific thing instead of the general thing. A colleague brings me something I didn't ask for just because she noticed I needed it. I say, I noticed that you noticed. That's one of my favorite things about you. Not just, thank you. I've started sending the letters. Not all of them, but more than before. It turns out the air is not as long a distance as Thomas thought. I still hum without knowing it, but now sometimes I catch it, and I stop for a moment, and I think of Thomas noticing it across 27 years of kitchens and libraries and car rides and early mornings. I think of him knowing that about me and keeping it like something private and precious and never saying it. And I think how strange to be seen so specifically by someone who couldn't find the words, and how lucky actually, even if the letter never made it to dinner. I've thought about what to do with his letters. Some I've shared with the people they were meant for. The letter to his brother about the thing they never resolved. I wrote to his brother, enclosed it and said, Thomas wrote this but couldn't send it. I thought you should have it. His brother called me 3 days later. He was quiet on the phone for a long time. Then he said, I always thought he didn't care. I said, he cared, he just didn't have the bridge. He said, that's exactly what he was, a bridge builder who couldn't cross his own. And I said, yes, that's exactly what he was. I want to ask you 2 things. The first, is there someone in your life you love specifically, not generally, not as a category, but the particular irreducible them? Who doesn't know how specifically you see them? What is stopping you from saying it? Not perfectly, not in a speech, just the specific thing, the one true detail. The second, is there a letter you've been meaning to send? Not a text, a letter, the kind where you say the real thing, because there is no one watching. Send it. Don't leave it in a shoebox. I will read every one of your answers. They matter to me specifically. Before you go, We talk a lot in this space about betrayal, about people who deceived, who left, who chose wrong. But tonight I want to say something different. Tonight I want to talk about the people who loved you and simply didn't know how to say it out loud. Who showed up every Tuesday? Who remembered how you take your coffee? Who saw you completely and never found the bridge? They loved you imperfectly, quietly, in the only language they had. If there is someone like that in your life, someone who loves in actions and not in words, maybe tonight is the night to meet them halfway. You speak the words, let them show up. That might be enough. That might be everything.